Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. Hello, good evening. You can stay.
Just hit the arrow key. Just
Okay,
go right.
all right, good, good. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. I see some new faces here. My name's Connie Pulsifer. I am the project manager for the Treeline project for the city. And I want to welcome you this evening. It's so good to see a big crowd here this evening. I hope we can have some good discussion about this project. I want to spend about 5 minutes, do a little housekeeping, tell you what the program is for the evening, and then my team and I are going to give you a short presentation, and then we will have a chance for conversation. So we have this room until 8:30 tonight, and that should give us plenty of time. I want to first introduce my team. Kayla Coleman is over on the right here. Many of you have seen Kayla at all the meetings. She's my counterpart at the city who's working with me. From Smith Group JJR, that is our consulting arm of the project, is Neil Bilodeau, Oliver Kiley, Smith Group's project manager, Keenan Gibbons over here, and we have JP over here at the sign-in table, who is an intern working with us at the city. So we will be here until the end of the meeting to answer any questions you have, and are looking forward to talking with you this evening. I also want to acknowledge the Citizen Advisory Committee members who were able to come this evening. Several advisory committee members were not able to be here. This is a group of citizens that volunteered about 18 months of their time to help guide this project. And so this was a volunteer group who worked with us every step of the way, providing us guidance at advisory committee meetings, reacting to materials we've provided to them. And we couldn't have done this without the Citizen Advisory Committee, so if you all wouldn't mind standing, I would appreciate acknowledging your presence tonight. So thank you so much for your help. There are many more who weren't able to be here tonight, and they send their regrets as well. I want to acknowledge a couple of council members in the room tonight, Councilmember Frenzel, and I think I saw Councilmember Eaton here, so thank you for being here as well. A little bit, it always helps us, because this is the beginning of the project, not the end. It helps us to have a better understanding of how you heard about this meeting, since I see a lot of new faces tonight. How many of you saw the flashing sign at First Street? Okay, so that sign seems to be working. Press release in the newspaper. Are you... And those of you who are on our email distribution list, great. So that seems to be working. What are some of the other ways you learned about the meeting? Civ City, good. Good. Social media, word of mouth, neighbors. So, you know, we're challenged in getting the word out. We try to use as many different methods as we can. So it looks like we got a fairly good turnout tonight. If you didn't have a chance to sign in, I would ask you to do that so we can give you some project information. If anybody needs, this is a piece we put together that answers some of the most frequently asked questions. Does anybody not have a copy of this? We can run one over to you. Finally, I'm speaking in a mic tonight because CTN is broadcasting and recording this meeting, and so it's not live. It will be rebroadcast at a later date, but it won't get picked up if I can't speak. So likewise, when we get to the discussion period, we're going to have to be orderly, because you also have to have a mic to answer, to have your question recorded on the CTN. So we'll have runners who will bring the mic to you, and I'll call on you, and it'll look seamless. You won't even know that we're being recorded. So tonight, what we'd like to do is give you an update about the project. I know some of you have been following this. Some of you may be new to the process. How many of you have attended a past meeting about the project? Okay, so good number. But there's a lot of you here who didn't raise your hand and may not know a lot about the project. So what my teammate Oliver and I are going to do is spend about 20 to 25 minutes to present to you where we are in the project. We're near the tail end of the project. We've been working on this for a couple of years now. And we're going to ask that you let us get through the presentation, and then we'll have the discussion and the conversation, because that way everyone will have the same kind of basic knowledge of the project, so we can have a good conversation afterwards. So we're going to give an overview of the project. We're going to talk a little bit about the Treeline framework plan, implementation strategies, next step. And then the rest of the evening is yours to ask the project team anything you'd like, and or look at the boards and displays on the side of the room. So first, a bit of an overview. Many of you know this project as the Allen Creek Greenway, and that's because the community's been talking about this for about 17 years. Do I have that right, Joe? About 17 years? So there have been lots of reports done by students, by volunteer groups, and what's different about this process is in 2016, City Council identified this as a priority project. They heard loud and clear from the community that this was a priority to improve non-motorized connections from the river into the downtown, into our near neighborhoods, down to the South Athletic Campus, and so they decided to, as a body, to make this a priority project, put some funding towards this, and charge staff with creating a team to look at the feasibility of an approach to make this alignment that goes from one end of town to the other. We did a deep dive on this. We did a lot of analysis first year, and to really understand the corridor, we came into the project with a real strong community vision, but we hadn't really had the resources to understand how feasible this is to actually happen. So we're going to talk about what makes this feasible and all the steps we went through to get there. So just a little bit about the project study area and the context. First things first, north is to the right. So that's different than most maps you see. The map just to confuse you, the map you're holding in your hand, north is straight up. So two different orientations. But what you'll see up here on the screen is is north to the right. So here we are at the Huron River. You can see that where it connects to the border-to-border trail at Argo Cascades general area is the north end of the project, and then it generally follows the Allen Creek floodway and the railroad that goes through town down to the south boundary of the property to South State Street in Stimson, sort of in the general area of the Salvation Army down there. So these boundaries were identified by council. This was our charge, to look at a feasible route in this area. Very quickly, though, council realized that there could be some real benefit to this project extending even further south down to Ellsworth, the city boundaries, to have further connections for regional trails. So City Council passed a resolution asking staff to keep that in mind as we look at future projects down the South State corridor, and also as we do our capital improvements program funding to allocate dollars to a future study. So if you want to think about this as a phase one, that might help you in thinking about future phases, future phases haven't been funded yet, but we're thinking about that as we go forward. So this is all really about connecting the dots. City Council and the community acknowledged it's really hard to get from the Argo Cascades and the border-to-border trail area into downtown. We have the challenges of North Main and the MDOT rail corridor. So what can we do to make those connections to, in the green dots, some of our most prized park areas in the city? In the yellow dots are close-in town neighborhoods, Water Hill, the Old West Side, the Old Fourth Ward, and into the south area, the U of M Stadium and the Ross Athletic Campus. And then in the core of all this is the downtown, this piece that it's really hard for people to move back and forth from the river into the downtown and into the Carytown area. So we've thought about a lot of key issues, and right from the very beginning of this project is we knew that we wanted to improve quality of life in the community. We wanted to improve mobility options so that you don't always have to use your car to get from one end of town to the other. I don't know how many of you see the people walking down the rail corridor on game days. So there's a real desire to get from downtown to the South Athletic Campus, but there's not a good way to do it. So we took a look at that. Understanding connectivity within the study area and other community destinations, like, as I said, the neighborhoods and parks and the border-to-border trail, making those connections. So this idea of non-motorized trails in the community is really catching on. We're making a lot of progress with trail connections. We now have a trail connection that goes out to Matai Botanical Gardens at the end of Fuller Park. If you haven't been on that one, it's just newly opened and it's fantastic. So that's making a connection to the border-to-border trail. We're working with the county to make a connection from Bandamer Park all the way out to Dexter and beyond. And all of this also connects to the state's vision of a statewide connection from Belle Isle to Ironwood, which is up in the very west corner of the Upper Peninsula. It's called the Iron Bell Trail. So this would be the in-town piece of this broader regional connection. And so that's why I think it excites the community so much, knowing that there might be the opportunity for non-motorized connections within our community outward to other communities as well. Oliver is going to be talking a little bit about feasibility. Now, what did that mean to us? We knew if we couldn't define a route that identified property access. So we knew we needed to get access to properties in order for this to be a feasible route. If we don't have access to properties, then it's not going to work. So some of the past community visions, and Oliver will touch on this, had envisioned using the rail corridor. We'll explain our analysis and why we're not able to do that to the degree in which we originally thought we could. But we also want to talk about tonight this kind of the structure and approach for implementation. So we're looking at a partnership on this project that is kind of new to the city. So it's a new paradigm for how to think about operation, maintenance, and implementation of the trail. We have a sustainability framework plan in the city, and this project actually touches on 10 of the 16 sustainability framework goals, so we feel like we're reaching a lot of metrics in providing non-motorized connections, potential stormwater management opportunities, using sustainable materials, and all of the other components that touch on these framework goals. So we are nearing the end of task 4 on this project. As I said, we started almost 2 years ago. We have talked to a lot of people through this process, and this is really the result of all of that community conversation. We have a project management team that extends across city units. We have a technical advisory committee that brings in staff and people from other agencies to bring different perspectives to this project to further explore the feasibility of a route. We put out an open membership to a citizen advisory committee, which filled really quickly, and worked with that group for 18 months. And then we had many stakeholder focus group meetings, community-wide meetings, one-on-one conversations with both residents and property owners. We talked to almost every property owner along the length of this alignment to ask for if they were willing, as a concept, to have this line drawn on this master plan that shows trail through their property. And in all cases, except where noted on the plan, we have gotten this buy-in from the community. So when I say plan, it doesn't show up on this plan, it shows up on the draft master plan that's on the website. So we've talked to a lot of people, gotten a lot of input, and what you'll see tonight is a result of that effort. What we hope to happen is we're going kind of forward to an approval process timeline. We hope that this master plan, when it's complete, will be adopted by both Planning Commission and City Council as an element of the city's master plan. And that's really important, because if we want to get funding for a project, you have to have a master plan in place. So we're making a great step in that direction as well. I'm going to turn it over to Oliver to talk about the framework plan, and then we'll open it up for conversation.
Thank you, Connie. Okay, so a couple big things to talk about. First, one is, as Connie mentioned early on, this project started off being called the Allen Creek Greenway and has shifted through a branding effort that the Conservancy helped lead to be called the Treeline and identified as an urban trail. And I think that's an important distinction to recognize. While the Greenway had very good visions and still has very excellent ideas to continue to transform the Allen Creek corridor, our charge, as Connie said, was really to find what's that feasible route that makes that non-motorized connection. And as we talk about the framework, you'll see that this route that we've identified, there's a lot of opportunity to build other projects and other things onto that, whether that be green space or stormwater projects or a variety of other things. So we'll get to that. Trail, to acknowledge that we are going through very complex, challenging. There's a lot of complicated situations. So part of the process has been trying to put thinking a little bit about what this. That said, something of our groups that we've worked with, making something pages all about biking, you know, in what happens. So continuous experience is really critical and important to everybody who is involved. Trail alignment to the extent possible. The trail side as well. Secondary connectors, other ways of feeding and tying people into it, as well as I mentioned, opportunities for other green spaces or other kinds of natural areas to be created along the corridor. Throughout the process, we've had a lot of questions.
Sorry, I need to do it.
Battery change or
There we go. Is that better? A little bit? Okay. So throughout this process, we've got a lot of questions about the design of the trail and the kinds of amenities and things that would be included on it. And so I'm not going to read through all of these right now, but yes, it will be paved. There'll be pedestrian scale lighting. The assumption is that there's going to be landscaping, stormwater management along the trail to manage runoff that's generated. That said, this isn't envisioned as primarily as a flood management or floodplain kind of project. There may be opportunities, again, that we can layer on as implementation moves forward, but that's not a primary driver for this trail. Things like incorporating art, interpretive elements, cultural elements into the trail, those are all things that we hope will be included in the implementation side of it. As for the trail itself, generally what this is envisioned to be is about a 30-foot wide corridor is our preferred width for the trail. Up to maybe 20 feet of that could be pavement, and that would include a separation of uses, so bicycle traffic would be separated from pedestrian traffic. Something we've heard quite a bit in the community is many of the trails that exist today, there's just conflicts, and during busy times, you get people going really fast on a bike, other people with strollers, and there's a lot of conflicts there. And so thinking about the kind of use that we'd anticipate for this, having something wider is pretty important. And then the remainder of that 10 feet of space can be used for landscaping, benches, furnishing, lighting, all those kinds of things. And certainly where we have are able to get more access to property, there's certainly an interest in expanding that and creating more green space or other amenities that can be along the trail. And as Connie mentioned, a lot of the prior plans for the trail have talked about utilizing the railroad corridor for that alignment. A couple things to understand about that as we think about what we're trying to achieve from a design standpoint with the trail. The railroad corridor is generally about 50 feet wide. The railroad tracks are right in the middle of it. We're going to do a little math here. You need 9 feet of separation from the center of the railroad track to either side of it, just to be clear for the trains and all that kind of stuff. So that only leaves, the tracks are in the middle of this 50-foot corridor, that only leaves about 16 feet on either side of the train tracks for a trail. Well, we're talking about maybe 20 feet of pavement alone, let alone other space for landscaping. It just doesn't fit. So really looking at that and meeting and talking with the railroad company about some of their concerns, you'll see reflected in alignment a shift towards utilizing more public and private property that's often parallel to the rail corridor, sometimes encroaching a little bit within it, but generally it's outside of the rail corridor in most locations. There will also likely be some on-street sections where the trail will be on-street, and the idea for that is that those street corridors would have wider sidewalks, separated bicycle facilities, or cycle tracks. You may have seen reference to those before, and that largely this would require removing parking on at least one side of the road where this is built, but then that would also provide room for additional landscaping, stormwater management, things like that along the whole roadway. And then the last kind of trail type that we've looked at here are what we're calling elevated ramp sections. So the framework identifies a number of bridge crossings over some of the major roads, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. But the idea is that within that 30-foot wide corridor, you could have a ramped section that would provide a more gentle ramp rather than, it's not like going up a flight of stairs over a bridge and dropping back down a flight of stairs. It's a much more gradual ramp, so if you're biking or running or jogging, you have that continuous experience up and down. And then these would also provide a kind of a parallel sidewalk connection from the existing street sidewalk down to wherever that ramp meets grade, so that again you have a point of access there to be able to get over bridges and things like that. The framework plan itself, and there's a big version of it here over on the boards, and we'll walk through it in a little bit more detail on the next slides. But there's two things I'll point out on this. There's big fat lines, which are what we're calling the primary alignment. So that's kind of the main stem of the trail, that 30-foot wide corridor. And then some thinner lines, which are for some near-term or alternative connections that we want to kind of keep in our back pocket. As one phase is built and we need to make a connection between two parts, there may be opportunities to do some near-term improvements to streets and things in the interim while we wait for those primary sections to be built. So a couple of things, we're going to zoom into this map, don't worry. So 5 kind of key things that drove the determination of this alignment. As Connie mentioned, feasibility was the number one. So other than a handful of property owners, our team, in working with the Conservancy, reached out and met with almost every property owner where this alignment is shown. And we asked them, are you comfortable with this alignment being shown on your property? And for everybody that we met with that has a route through their property, they had said, yes, we're comfortable, recognizing that there's a lot more conversations that need to happen as implementation moves forward. So, you know, whether a property gets purchased or the city just gets an easement, or whether there's some other kind of change that happens, that all has to be worked out, and what the detail and exact design of the trail is, that all has to be understood in a lot more detail. And that we've conveyed that to property owners as well. The second piece, the big driver, was again trying to have that continuous experience so that if people are on the trail, they have lots of points of access, but when you're on it, you can just go and you don't have to stop really regularly. And then that ties right into that user experience and safety point, so that we're really trying to use this trail to provide connections over some critical safety areas in town. So getting over North Main Street, for instance, is a big one. That's a very congested area by North Main and Depot. Not very friendly for pedestrians, so providing people a way to get through that is good. Being able to connect to community assets and destinations, Connie mentioned many of those earlier. And then also being a little bit visionary too about this, and if we're going to make the investment to build this, are there opportunities to do something that is really unique and special along the way that creates a a strong experience or a landmark for the community that becomes a source of pride and a source of identity. Okay, so we're going to go through, this is going to be a review of the framework plan in 8 movements here, for those with a musical mind. Okay, so this is starting at the north end on at Argo Pond, and just to orient you, this is where the Argo Dam is, and this dashed line is the border-to-border trail. I'm going to shift down and talk about the primary alignment more on the next slide. I'll just mention this one. This is where we have some of these thinner lines, is an example of where there's a near-term or an alternative route that we wanted to kind of keep in our back pocket. And so this was the idea of connecting through Bluffs Nature Area. We met extensively with Natural Areas Preservation, as well as some of the mountain bikers that use that area to figure out how that might work. But there's a tentative or a potential alignment through there with a bridge, an elevated ramp section over North Main Street and over the MDOT rail line and down into Bandemere Park. So that's one option should some of these other, our preferred approach be infeasible. So I'm going to start here. So this is where Argo Dam comes across the existing border-to-border trail. And so what we're proposing is a ramp of some kind. The images speak to a spiral ramp idea. There's other ways that could be designed, but that would connect from the border-to-border trail over the MDOT rail line, over North Main Street, up to the corner of Wilt and Sunset. And then from there, the main trail would follow along Wilt Street, parallel to the railroad tracks, mostly within the street right-of-way. We would cross Summit Street and then go into 721 North Main, which is a city-owned property. And that would connect along the west edge of 721. There is another section that of the primary trail that's being in an engineering phase right now. And so you may have heard reference to the berm opening project, which is a floodplain management project to cut a stormwater tunnel through that MDOT railroad berm where it's bermed up. Part of that project is now looking to add a secondary tunnel for pedestrian and bicycle use that actually goes underneath that railroad bridge. That would provide a connection also right over to the border-to-border trail, and then going, this is east, this comes out right by the Amtrak station on Depot Street. So that's like another gateway point to be able to get people in. And we've had some questions about that, why sort of do both of these. One, again, it's really recognizing that North Main Street is a very difficult road to cross. And so if people are coming from the east or the southeast and want to get on the trail, you don't want to have to force them to come across here to get onto it. This is a really great way to be able to pull people in and get them on. And then then the main branch heads south. This is the messiest page of all of these, so it gets a little easier as we go. So again, this is the connection down through 721 North Main. There's an old rail spur that runs behind. This is where the Ann Arbor Distillery is. There's an old rail spur that comes down to grade at Felch Street here. We cross Felch. And then this is Kingsley Condos, which has just started construction. And part of the site plan review process for that got a 30-foot wide easement for the Allen Creek Trail, the Treeline. I'm going to do that a bunch of times tonight, so you can laugh each time that happens. Anyway, for the Treeline, we got an easement secured for that, so that's a piece that where we already have property access. There would be a small on-street section, and then we would utilize private property to bridge up, and then I should mention the dashed lines mean where it switches from on-grade to a ramped situation. So we ramp up and bridge over Miller Street and then come back down to grade. And there's been a lot of conversation about Miller. Do we really need a bridge there? Rationale is that Miller Street, as you may know, comes downhill in both directions. That's visibility issue 1. There's a railroad bridge that blocks visibility. That's number 2. I'm up to 3 already. 2. And then also the road has kind of a kink in the direction as it changes, so that's 3. It's a nasty area to try and cross as a pedestrian during rush hour. So being able to bring people over that, we think is a good way to go. And then on the south side of Miller, we're looking to tunnel through with another pedestrian tunnel underneath the railroad bridge, berm, onto the west side. From there, we'd be going through a private property with a connection west into West Park with a crossing point right into West Park. So again, that then ties in to the West Park trails and can bring people in. And then the main branch continues south through here, ramps up, bridges over Huron Street, stays elevated but with some ground level access points, stays elevated past the YMCA, and then as it approaches Liberty, that's where the railroad tracks come back to grade, and the trail would kind of follow that elevation and come back to grade right at Liberty as well. And then Liberty and First Street becomes kind of a key on-grade gateway point. So that's probably the busiest road that we're not crossing with a bridge, and that was deliberate to try and make a point where if you're trying to get people into downtown, create a really strong statement as people are driving in. That was kind of the closest point and a really strong point to do that. The route then stays on First Street, crosses William, and goes back onto private property as it heads south through private property out onto Ashley. It's on street for about a half a block. A new mid-block crossing would be built, and then we bridge up and ramp over Madison and Main Street and South Main Street and drop back down to grade at Mosley. And again, as part of this construction, the city got a 15-foot wide easement to be used for the trail, so that in conjunction with the small sliver from the railroad property would give us enough to be able to build the trail through there. It then goes on grade through property out onto Hill Street. And then from Hill, it's a new crossing improvement here at Green out to this intersection, which could be improved. This is a massive intersection at Green and Hoover. Clean that intersection up, then we would go east down Hoover on street to State Street when we would start to head south towards Stimson. And something to point out, even though these are on-street sections here, one of the key improvements that we can link in with these on-street sections is trying to improve those pedestrian crosswalks. So South Burns Park neighborhood, there's a lot of students and faculty and just residents that are trying to cross over State Street, and during busy times, that's a challenge. So being able to improve that corridor, not just moving along it, but crossing the street is pretty important. And then this would continue south to the ending point at State Street in Stimson. So this is down where the Salvation Army is, just south of the Stadium Bridge. Okay. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly on the next couple. So this was just some illustrative drawings showing what the trail could look like. So point A, this is looking at the trail up by that spiral ramp in Argo Pond that crosses over the MDOT rail line, crosses over North Main Street, and connects up to Wilt Street at Sunset. And then this would be the border-to-border trail down at grade. Here's where the Argo Bridge is, Argo Dam, and then that's that bridge with the tunnel underneath the MDOT rail line. So that's kind of a shot of how that could look. One of the ideas of these is that these gateway bridges could be kind of signature elements depending on how they're designed, and would appear in similar or different ways at some of these other key crossing points and gateways into town. This was a smaller node, but looking at the Summit Street and Wilt Street intersection, So the main branch of the path would come through, cross the street, and then go through 721 North Main Street. This is the bridge if you're up on the track at the YMCA looking north, kind of out of the window. This is what you might see. So this is Huron Street down below with a bridge crossing over Huron. Again, in some cases there may be stairs to provide access. This could also be a sidewalk or a ramp that ties back into here. That's something from a design standpoint, will be worked out in future phases. And then you can see a connection on the left out to West Park and the Miller Bridge a little bit in the distance. Just an idea for that on-street sections and that gateway point down at Liberty. So again, almost starting to take that street intersection and make it feel like more of a pedestrian-oriented space. A lot of communities are building, raised crosswalks or raised intersections with special pavements and other kinds of treatments to make them very safe from a pedestrian standpoint and kind of slow drivers down. There's a variety of designs for that. And then lastly, the bridge looking north now at South Main Street at Madison. So that bridge that kind of comes up and articulates a few times as it moves through that area to avoid buildings and things like that. Okay. So a few more slides just on the implementation side of it, and then we'll be done shortly. So as Connie mentioned, the Treeline Conservancy is working with the city to figure out a partnership arrangement of some kind and put together a business plan for how to execute this vision and make the tree line something that can happen. This is very similar to how many other major urban trails and other communities are built. So closest to home is probably the Riverfront Conservancy in Detroit. That was responsible as a public-private partnership for building the Riverwalk along Detroit. Subsequently, they started building the DeQuinder Cut, which is a couple mile long non-motorized trail connection that connects to some key destinations in Detroit. And so in that situation, the Treeline or the Riverfront Conservancy was responsible for the fundraising, the design, the engineering. They have operating and management agreements and requirements for how to manage and maintain it. And so the city and the Treeline Conservancy is looking to figure out, what's that set of roles and responsibilities that the Treeline will play in trying to put this and make this vision happen. So part of their business plan is this governance structure piece of it that identifies the roles and responsibilities of the city versus the Treeline and how that works. A second component of it is the financial side, and so it's thinking about not just the capital cost that you need for construction of the different phases of this project, but also those ongoing operational costs. So who's maintaining it, who's managing it, who's paying to keep the pedestrian lights and the street lighting going along it. All of those kinds of things need to be considered in this business plan. That said, the Treeline Conservancy is looking at a very broad range of funding opportunities for this. It could be grants, donations, sponsorships. Ann Arbor, I've lived in Ann Arbor my whole life. And I can say that Ann Arbor doesn't have a strong history of asking for money necessarily as a community to fund projects. And so when you look at a lot of other communities like in Detroit or Grand Rapids that fund large public projects, it really takes a lot of different interests and constituents and groups to pull together to figure out how to do it. So those details aren't worked out, but those are the things that the Treeline Conservancy will be looking at. This is the most boring slide of the evening. Very important, but I'm not gonna read through these. Suffice to say, there's lots of management and maintenance kinds of things, enforcement, all that stuff that needs to be considered in this plan. And then lastly starts to relate to the implementation strategy. So how is this really rolled out? How is this process phased? We recognize that building this whole trail, it's about 2.7 miles long. That's a lot to bite off in one piece. It'll very likely be phased in increments. So what does that phasing strategy look like? Again, needing to reach back out to property owners and figure out, here's what we're proposing. Here's a more detailed idea. How do we come to an agreement with property owners? That's all part of the next phase of implementation and moving that forward. That said, we have put some thought into the phasing approach for this. Generally speaking, the thought is that the north zone, which goes from that spiral ramp connection, includes this connection out to Depot Street, and then goes south to about William Street. That's kind of the first phase that we'll be looking at to implement. The second phase is mostly combinations of private property, and that goes from William to Hill. And then Hill Street South, that is entirely presently planned to be within public rights-of-way. And so as we look a little bit more at that north zone in detail, what we've started to do is to think about, how can these different project areas be established and set up, and how can some of these be advanced, and then maybe some of those near-term connections can provide a linkage between them as they move forward. As I mentioned, this project has already received FEMA grants and funding and is in an engineering and design phase right now for this linkage. The thinking is that building this section next would provide that really critical and immediate access point over North Main and get people to the riverfront. So that's a key piece. A lot of Section C is either public land, public right-of-way, or rail property. So there's a limited number of property owners to work with to build that section. D has a bit more private property, as does, but that includes essentially the Miller Bridge. Section E has the Huron Street Bridge. And then Section F is again within public rights-of-way. So it's kind of how we're thinking about that. And then certainly this has been a topic of conversation in terms of the cost for the project. You may have seen the $55 million number kind of in the middle of that range discussed. So a few things about that. This is the list of kind of physical design that includes, that cost number includes. So that's a construction cost estimate. So that's, all of the physical stuff that's built for the Greenway. That does also include what we call a lot of soft costs, so contingency, all the design fees, the engineering fees, permitting, all those kinds of things. It does not include, if there's property acquisitions or costs related to getting easements or environmental cleanup or other utility work that the city wants to piggyback onto this construction. It doesn't include those kinds of things. That said, as we think about what this project costs relative to many of the projects that we benchmarked against, it's kind of in the middle of that range. The 606 in Chicago is a recent project that opened, very similar length, almost all elevated trail along the top of a part of a berm. That was about $6,600 a linear foot. A lot of people have asked about, the High Line, and we put this in here not because we're trying to recreate or mimic the High Line or import it into Ann Arbor, but just to put the cost number in perspective for people. That was a super expensive project, and the elevated structure was already built, so didn't even include that. Okay.
So where are we going next with this? As I mentioned, Oliver and I are on the presentation circuit. We've been going to all the boards and commissions and talking to them and asking for their support for the project. We have dates that need to be confirmed but tentatively planned for Planning Commission public hearing on November 8th. And then City Council action on December 18th. So anytime we adopt an element of a master plan, it has to go through both bodies, and it goes through Planning Commission first, and then on to City Council. So we hope by the end of the year both bodies will take favorable action on this, and we will have a new element of the city's master plan. Concurrently to that, last month we distributed a draft plan, which is available for everyone to see on the city's website. Sent it out to adjoining jurisdictions to get their comments, and so we will fold their comments into our final presentation and public hearing to Planning Commission, and that will conclude this, but it's just the beginning of the project, because there's many steps after a master plan. You can think of master plan as sort of a conceptual framework. There's many steps beyond that, looking at the phasing and the funding, and so we need to continue to have this conversation after this master plan is adopted. So with that, I'd like to open this up for discussion. Any questions you have of us? Any comments you have? Yeah, sure. CTN, if you can hear me, we need a second mic, please. Doug, yeah. Oh, we got one. So we're going to, the way this is going to work is I'm going to call on you so that we can pick all this up through CTN. We'll have either Keenan or Neil get a mic over to you, and then we will, so Doug, it looks like you have you have the mic.
Yeah, thanks for letting me go first. I can go home and have dinner.
So if you can hold it up.
Okay,
Thank
so it's a very impressive set of documents and research, thoroughgoing, proposal. Very exciting, and I very much like the phasing, starting at the north and moving toward the south. As an architect, though, I know how expensive these bridges are, and the one at Madison, which is long and kinked and a cable stay bridge, I'd hate to see that be, I'm glad it's phase 3. I'd hate to see that be a deal killer because I think it's very expensive, and I'm not sure an at-grade crossing in Madison would be that bad. There's a light there. And frankly, when it gets onto Hoover and the rest of that route is some of the least compelling parts of the route. So frankly, I just hope phase C doesn't in any way impede progress.
Great. Thank you for that. If you can hand the mic back to Keenan. Doug, that actually is a good segue to something I forgot to mention. So when we talk about a master plan, it has built-in flexibility. So if we continue to have conversations with the community and we find we either don't need a bridge or don't need a segment of the trail, or conversely, if something comes online that could benefit this project that isn't shown in the master plan, we have that flexibility built in to adapt the plan to changing circumstances. So starting on the north end, we feel fairly certain about this border-to-border trail connection and the Iron Belt connection. As we move south, we see more community conversations. So thank you for that. So, gentleman in the back, Keenan, if you could hand the mic over.
I like to plan. One thing I'm really concerned about is I've seen people walking on, not game day stuff, but on the railroad tracks, especially over by Washington there, and I really think access to the railroad tracks needs to be closed off. That's the place to build the wall. Because I just hate to see somebody get run over. I almost got run over at a Metro Park trail. I foolishly tried to cross the track, and it's scary. I almost got killed. That's one thing. So I urge all to fence off and shut down any access to the actual railroad tracks. And the other thing is, if you check with the adjoining cities, city of Dexter did a really good job with Mill Pond, and they submitted their thing. So I mean, if you could consult with them, and I think they got a lot of funding from the DNR, the Natural Gas Trust. So that's something that maybe you could look at.
Thank you. Good time for me to comment on the rail company. So this is operated by Ann Arbor Railroad. Watco Company is the holding company. This is a short line freight rail through the city. I mean, if you've noticed on game days, they don't run the train during game times, and they go fairly slow through the community, but they have that loud horn, right? Anybody who lives nearby, it wakes me up. So Watco shares your concern about trespassing on the railway. We've met with Watco Company and Ann Arbor Railroad several times through this process. I think we've developed a very good relationship with them. We don't have agreement yet to we are asking for some portions of their right-of-way to be used, but their primary concern is safety and liability. So they would agree, and in concept, they feel that if we can provide a parallel route that provides access with people that loosely follows the line of the railroad, we'll be doing a service in terms of a non-motorized access. So thank you for that comment. Yes, over here, Donna. We have to get the mic to you, Donna. So a little bit of pause here. Bear with us.
You mentioned that the trail would go, I don't know, by near to the train station, but the train station may not be in the same place pretty soon. So it's great to have the trail give access to the train station. So assuming that the train station is moved, I guess, to Fuller, probably, maybe. Do you have a plan for having the trail connect there or not?
Yeah, so I think I heard somebody mumble back there that the potentially the border-to-border trail, being able to get people onto that could then provide a connection. Part of the border-to-border trail runs on the really wide side path that goes in front of Fuller along Fuller Road. So if you can get people on the border-to-border one way or another, that can provide that connection to the potentially new train station location. The other thing is too, even if the station moves, Wheeler Park is right there. I know we actually work right across the street from there. See a lot of school kids from the daycares or from the schools nearby coming down using the park. There's tons of people walking through there right today and getting on the railroad track berm where it's low and walking along the track. So that's a strong desire line now, even ignoring the train station being there. So I think that'll still have a lot of benefit in the future as well.
Great, thanks for that. Anybody else? So we'll do Robert and then Ray, and then Jess.
Hi, my name's Robert Helber. I own a couple properties that are along the proposed trail. One of them is just east of the YMCA. It runs parallel with the railroad tracks, and then another one where it's designed to go underneath the railroad track at 310 West End, where Ann Street dead ends into the. I know you guys have talked a lot about contacting people and talking to them about it. But to date, I mean, we've had just up until just real recently, we've really never had any contact with anybody about this. And there's about 25 or 30 parking spots that we have that run along that section there up to Maynard Battery, where it's going to go over Miller Street. And I just would like somebody at some point in time to contact me so that we can understand the magnitude of what this is going to mean to us there, and if it's something that we would be on board with doing something. So.
Thank you, Robert, for introducing yourself. We definitely want to get your contact information. We've made all attempts to contact as many people as we can and are being very careful in the plan to put big asterisks next to those we haven't been able to connect with. So, Ray, I'm sorry, but Jess got the mic first, and then we'll hand it over to you.
Way to go, Neil. Hi, I'm Jessica Lita, and I'm super excited. I was reading through your 60-page document on the plan earlier, so well done you. I wanted to say one thing and ask one thing. The phrase that you mentioned that I'm most excited about are the trail's unique experiences and landmark opportunities. I'm really excited for this to be something that can set Ann Arbor apart and make us look really unique, not that we don't already have that, but continue to augment the opportunity. I'm also interested to understand, I understand the difference between capital and operating costs, so at what point in your fundraising do you begin construction, and what do you need as far as fundraising goes?
So there it goes. Okay. So that's something that we'll have to kind of be worked out and working with the Treeline Conservancy. So, a lot of it will be taking that $55 million estimate for the whole project, and as the next phases of implementation move forward, start to say, okay, for each of these project zones, what might that be? What do we need to do? I think a lot of the conversations with property owners in places where we don't have access need to happen so that we can understand what the trail needs to be, how it needs to accommodate, existing uses. We met with some property owners, for instance, not Robert, but that had said, we'd love to be able to keep parking on our property, and if you're doing an elevated section, can that be designed in a way so that we can still park cars underneath it? Those kinds of things need to be worked out, and then we can start to understand what the actual costs will be for construction for any one of these particular phases.
So thank you for your comment, and thank you for reading the report. I encourage everyone to do that, and I promise it won't put you to sleep. Didn't put you to sleep. Good, right?
It is a great project, and I know it's taken a long time to get where you are. But I had a specific question with regard to where you are in relationship to the berm part of it, because that has always been, that's taken something that's come in stages. The berm, which is off of Depot. And where are you at this particular point in terms of moving ahead on that berm, and also the cooperation of the nearby property owners and all of that? Is that all settled at this particular point so that you're free to go? And what do you expect to what will be accomplished by that berm in relationship to the border-to-border trail, floodway sorts of issues, and also the nature of pedestrian crossing?
Diagram of that. So the berm project is being designed and engineered right now. It's on a separate track, but we're coordinating with the group. They have the FEMA dollars for there's going to be 2 tunnels under the MDOT berm, and one is going to be for flood management, and so they have the money for that. I think they're still seeking the balance of the dollars for the pedestrian tunnel, but they're working on that as well, so they'll be parallel to each other. What that will accomplish for us is getting under the MDOT rail berm, which we have buy-in from MDOT to do that. We also have buy-in for MDOT to walk along the edge of their berm there. And so they're very supportive of this and on board. And then it allows this connection here, and this is where the Allen Creek comes into the to the river, where there would be a short bridge section over the Allen Creek, and then connecting over to the border-to-border trail. And so that spiral then over the MDOT rail and road will be another connection up to the Water Hill neighborhood. So it's moving along. Did that answer all your questions?
So there's no problem with regard to cooperation with property owners?
No, they're working that out. So we've got Peter. Who else is going to have some questions? We have Margaret. So Peter, then Margaret.
Hi, I'm Peter Hauk from the Washtenaw Bicycling and Walking Coalition. And I think overall this is a great project. I especially like what we have there at North Main, because that's such a difficult place to get through on foot and on bicycle traffic. So thanks for your hard work on it. It's really good. There's one part of the project that I'm really disappointed with, though, and that is on the south side where it goes through U of M's campus. And if anyone questions the need for a better route through there, all you need to do is go stand on the stadium bridge on game day, and you will see pedestrians coming from both directions, walking on the train tracks. And I mean, the tree line is going to get used 365 days a year, but this is just the most obvious example of why we need it, is game day. When we invite 100,000 people to our city, and the best that we can give them is walking on the train tracks. That's really disappointing. And I'm not satisfied with the rationale that the university has given, that they are actively using these areas and that they're needed for safe egress from buildings. That's what we read in the MLive article about that. It just doesn't make sense to me that the university can't, with the resources of the College of Engineering and the School of Architecture and Urban Planning, that we can't solve this problem. I feel like they've given up on it before we've even really started looking for the right solution. Jim Costa, to his credit, has agreed to meet with me this week or next to explain more about it, but I think it's obvious that a a trail like this that includes 6 blocks of State Street is just not as good as it could be. So I'm looking forward to working with them, and WBWC is going to be working with hopefully with this team and with the university on a better solution.
Well, all I can say, Peter, is good for you for setting up a meeting with the university. The Citizen Advisory Committee, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I think showed disappointment as well. The University of Michigan was represented on the Citizen Advisory Committee, so we met with them several times through the process. We showed lots of different options where we actually were going through their property. But in the end, we decided that we were going to treat the university like any other property owner who requested we not show the trail alignment on their map. And we think it serves the master plan in a better light if we don't show something that they are not in agreement with. But we're going to continue to talk to them as well. That is one of the later phases of the project. We want to start on the north end, but it's never too soon to get out there. And Peter, I know you and your group will do a really good job of advocating, so I appreciate your help on this. Margaret.
Well, first let me thank all the people who spent so much time and energy, staff and citizens and consultants alike. It's a very handsome set of documents here. I want to reiterate, I think, the opening comment. I'm another architect in town, and I think some of the bridges that are proposed as part of this plan make perfect sense, at North Main and I think at Huron. But I just really plead with you to approach the Madison Bridge, the South Main Street Gateway, with a lot more, I guess, caution at this point. And you've got some proposals for on-grade improvements that I think could be so relevant to that location. The sketch that is actually not in this flyer, I guess on the board now, is quite mysterious to me because I really don't understand how it engages the rest of the conditions around it. We know these bridges have weird spaces underneath them. It's a big three-dimensional thing. And it's, I don't know, it just seems like it's overkill at that location. I think we can really look at on-grade solutions for that. So I really, as we evolve this plan, I look forward to that being interrogated more thoroughly and I think creatively and thoughtfully. So the last question I really have has to do with point 8 here. What is the plan for the city-owned properties along the tree line? And it says here that North Main, West Washington, and First and William, I guess they'll be continued to be studied in future plans. So is that in a way saying that is somebody else's concern or someone else's research project? Or is that something that you feel is kind of embedded in this master plan?
Okay, well, thank you for your comment, Margaret. I know you and I have had long conversations about this, and I appreciate you coming out again tonight. Margaret is referring to question number 8 in the information packet you have, which is page 4. And so we've gotten this question several times. What's the plan for the city-owned properties along the tree line? So what Margaret is referring to is 721 North Main Street, 415 West Washington, which is across the street from the Y, and the First and William property. And so the purpose of this project that we're working on was to find a feasible route for the trail and not to preclude any opportunities on those properties. So we knew we wanted the trail to be aligned through city-owned property because we would get property access that way, but we wanted to do it in such a way that it didn't preclude any future studies on those properties. So Margaret's question is somebody else studying those properties? Well, we've been studying those properties for a long time. There's lots of different plans for 721 North Main. There have been plans for 415 West Washington, and First and William, I know there's a resolution that says that will be green space when it's not a parking lot anymore. So They will continue to be studied. I don't know what the timeline is, but rest assured they'll be coordinated with this project because they're integral to this project. So we don't have any plans at the moment, any activity, although I will say at 415 Washington, they are looking at the historic designation of one of those buildings and determining how to move forward with one of those buildings. But I'm not part of that team, so I can't give you too many more details about that. But there will be coordination. I think the team that will be working on those projects are going to be working with the Treeline team every step of the way. So I saw right here your name, Kathy, and then let's go Kelly and then Vince. Kathy, Kelly, Vince.
Hi, yeah, I'm a property manager, and your line runs through our property over by the YMCA.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of goes back to the two architects' comments. And my memory is terrible, but a couple of months ago, a couple gals came by, and they're part of a sidewalk improvement project, or improving the pedestrian walkways and crosswalks. Are you working with them, as far as maybe making that crossing at Madison? I think that's where they were talking about the crooked bridge or whatever. Are you working alongside that project, or are they working with you to help offset some of the costs?
On Madison?
Wherever. Or is this a completely separate project with separate
It is
funding?
a separate project from this. So you're talking about ramps, the sidewalk replacement program and the ramp replacement
That's what it sounds
program.
like, yeah.
Yeah, they will coordinate with us, but
Okay.
there's so many of those around the city. Some of them touch on this area and
Okay.
some don't. But we all talk.
Okay.
So we do coordinate. They're trying to get those ramps in to improve the ADA,
Yes.
the accessibility at curbs.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering about that street crossing there, if they came back down to grade instead of putting that big bridge in, if they would be part of that.
That will be considered as an alternative. Anywhere we
Okay.
have a bridge, we're going to be looking at
Gotcha.
options because it's, it takes time to raise money for bridges. So we want to make sure that we have crossings in place. So we call those kind of near-term opportunities in the
Okay.
plan, improving on road sections. I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no, you are. I
Okay.
just was wondering, if that $55 million, if that's, you're taking all that into consideration and you're
We-
not doubling your efforts,
Right, yes.
putting in a bunch of stuff that you're going to end
Yeah.
up tearing out.
Yes, we are coordinating
Okay.
with those road projects.
Okay. And my other question too was, was it Herbert? Yeah. The parking, especially, somebody just said too, the First and Williams, you're going to make that green space eventually. What is going on with the parking? I mean, are you building more parking? I mean, there's not enough parking as it is.
You mean at First and William?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact timeline of First and William. What I was referring to is that there is a resolution in place that if it is no longer parking, then it will be green space, but I don't know
Okay.
what the time frame is for that.
Okay, because I know if you go through our parking lot, we're going to lose 50% of our parking.
Right.
So I'm just wondering where all those people are going to park.
It's a good question.
Okay.
So Kelly, and then we'll go over to Vince.
Hi, Kelly Schwartz with the Get Downtown program. We are thrilled about this project and its opportunity to bring people into downtown. One of the biggest things that I get when I talk to employees downtown about commuting, not bringing their car into downtown, they say it's not safe to ride my bike, it's not safe to walk, so hopefully this is going to give people options in coming into downtown. Going to the north, thinking about my old rowing days, I don't know how big that circular bridge is going to be, but I know when we rowed to the dam and we turned our boats around, that was always kind of difficult to do with an 8. So I don't know if you guys are working with the rowing clubs over there just to make sure that there's going to be enough room for people to turn around, because it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. That's a good question, Kelly. We know we'll need to work with that group because we know there's some constraints in that area. And so Donna, to answer, Donna asked whether the bridge will go over the river. This is right now it's shown as needing because we're so land constrained there, but it hasn't been designed yet. It's just a concept idea, but yes, the reminder about the rowing clubs is really
Right, and the traffic
important.
on the other side from the livery too, I mean, just added a lot of traffic over in that area, so just something to be mindful of.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So we'll pass it over to Vince, and then we'll do another round. And then Rita.
Hi, Vince Caruso, Allen's Creek Watershed Group was also on the CAC, and thanks for all the work on this, and I'm glad we've gotten this far. The Watershed Group's been at this for quite a while, as well as I'm on the board of the Sierra Club, and they've been involved in promoting a greenway as well. But I just want to make some points about the benefits of a greenway in economic terms that I think people don't realize, that most communities now
Here, let me give you mine.
most communities now realize that a walkable, bikeable community is actually highly desired. My brother's a planner outside of Cincinnati, and they are suburbanized and to the hilt, very conservative. They have gone hog wild on bikeable, walkable, and has done tremendous quality of life for them. You know, they don't have to get in the car. They can get out and walk. The kids can walk to school, bike to school. It's a totally different experience there now. And everybody now wants that, you know, they want sidewalks. They want bike lanes and bike routes. So the other issue, I think there's a lot of planners here tonight. I think we can probably all agree that any properties along this site are going to go up in value the day it's done, in my opinion. I think that's been shown time and again. The downtown community is going to gain tremendously because we know that people who are biking and walking will spend a lot more money than people who are driving. And if we can get people to walk down to the downtown, they'll be spending a lot more money. And it's a little mercenary to talk like that, but the environment and the economics always go hand in hand. And the other point I would just like to make is about stormwater issues. I think, you know, we need to remember that we're facing greater stormwater challenges in years to come. You look at Houston, you look at Brownsville, you look at Florida, you look at these other communities, they're being inundated with water. It's like 100,000-year rain just happened down near Houston by some calculations. So we need to make sure that we, especially the parcels that the city owns now, they're in the floodplain and in the floodway, we need to think about those as being really valuable pieces of property that could reduce the flood hazard for communities upstream in the old west side and the older parts of the downtown, and not discount the value of that, because we don't want to diminish the tax value of existing homes to put in new taxable property. Because a lot of times you're going to lose money by causing more flood hazard. And we don't want to do that. And we're facing major storm events almost every year now. There was a 500-year rain in Warren, Michigan, just 2014. The Lawton neighborhood got hit with a 5 or 6 inch rain on 2012 with the tornado that went by. That was supposed to go right over the city. Did a right hook, and the meteorologist said, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, these really powerful storms do a right hook. And it just dumped a tremendous amount of rain on Lawton. That was supposed to go right over the city. So I think we need to, you know, make sure that we don't compromise the quality of the downtown. There's very valuable neighborhoods down there. We don't want to endanger them. We want to reduce flood hazard. And I think, you know, this is one way we can do that in conjunction with trails and bikeability. So.
Thank you, Vince. If you could hand it to Rita. I always appreciate your perspective, Vince, so thank you.
Hi, Rita Mitchell here. I was on the Citizens Advisory Committee, and I just was noticing the North Main section that you're pointing out that has the dotted lines. So it's kind of like back to feet on the ground there, no bridge. That is a complicated area to cross Main Street if you're coming from the west side and east side. So I'm glad to see that that's marked as something for attention. I wouldn't expect another bridge there, but another way to cross the street safely, safer than it is now, would be really great.
Thank you. Okay, another show of hands for comments. So we've got Dick. Anybody else? I'm going to ask for comments from people who haven't had a chance to speak yet before I do second rounds. So Dick, Alice.
I'm Dick Norton. I live in the Old West Side. I think this is wonderful too. I think it's
Can you hold this?
a great project. I'm very much in favor of it. I'm coming back to the comments about the rail line and the right-of-way and creating more access. And I wonder, I know you have a preference for a 20 to 30 foot width, but you can have a 10-foot trail that can get a lot of people through. And in parts of the right-of-way, particularly down by the stadium, you might be able to get a 10-foot trail with a wall that has the benefit of getting people through there, and it's also protecting them from the rail line. So can you explore the possibility of having throughways that aren't the full trail with all of the amenities, but still provide a point of access that actually may make the rail line safer? Because now you're controlling, instead of forcing people to illegally walk along the rail line because they don't have any place else to go. So just an idea. You maybe you've thought about it already, I don't know, but it's just something to think about.
Good. Thank you for that comment. And Alice is right there.
Hi, I have worked with everybody who's on the CAC, as well as many years before that with various volunteer groups on the idea of this route, trail, Greenway. And I can't believe I still have so many questions and so many desires, but this is great progress. And even more so, I would like to think of these near-term opportunities as something that we could really jump on, because as soon as we see something that's visible and that we can use, that'll really give a lot of momentum to the actual implementation of the plan. So I would even advocate for on-street routes first, if we can do it and coordinate it with the pedestrian safety program and the road reconstruction programs, where they do different kinds of lane patterns on top of the new pavement, more pedestrian safety crossings and all of these things. I think that if we could identify those that are happening as part of the trail, it might help us really begin to have not just a vision, but a tangible object to get us inspired.
Yeah, very, very good point, Alice. It might, I'm sure this is a strategy we've talked about, is getting some of these near opportunities in place to get this momentum going and an interest in the trail connection. So thank you for that. Anybody else? This is good conversation. Questions, comments? If you'd like to spend the rest of your time looking at the boards, we can do that as well. So anybody who hasn't had a chance to speak first, yes.
My name's Lou. Yeah, that's right. Just a quick comment. Snow removal might be an issue. Should take that into your plans, because the cross-country skiers will love it after a heavy snowstorm, but the bikers won't. So, how heavy of equipment will these things take over the bridges? Is a smaller piece of equipment, like Snow Buddy, going to have to make 4 or 5 passes to cover the 30 feet, et cetera?
So we have, certainly we're not there yet, but we have talked about this as a primary non-motorized connection in town, and so trying to keep the primary routes plowed, I think, is going to be important to the success of this. And if you start getting commuters who use this in the winter, they're going to expect it to be plowed. So thank you for that comment. Dick, did you have another thing that you wanted to say? Okay, so anybody else? This is really great. We have more time if you'd like, or if you'd like to wander around and talk to each other and look at the boards until 8:30, we can do that as well. What would you like to do? Are we done? Are we talked out? Yes. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out tonight. And feel free to stick around. We will try to empty this space at 8:30.